And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off.
Go ahead and say it, Ed. Go Tigers!
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
You like that? You like that?
F it. Jamar's down there somewhere.
The New Orleans Saints select Marcus Davenport.
No!
Splash Brothers. Yeah.
It's playoff. Keep going, Brace.
Playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs.
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Welcome to Chasing the Trophy Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Derek Sanders, coming at you for the Week 3 Waiver Pod. Man, has it been a crazy weekend of NFL football. Unfortunately, this pod, Clay nor Josh will be with us, but Josh is going to join us later on this week. And as we do our Start, Sit, Sleeper pod. But first off, we're going to go ahead and jump right on in with our prayer as we normally do. Lord, just thank you for everything you continue to bless us with. Just thank you for this wonderful game of football that we can find fellowship and hopefully find an avenue to serve in your name, Lord. And just please be with the people out there that need you and just help give us the words and encouragement to find and shine a light for you, Lord. Just please be with us as we go throughout our everyday life and shine a light and spread your name, Lord. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, guys. So jumping right on in, this is our Week 3 Waiver Wire pod. And y'all should see a graphic come up on Facebook as Clay's getting that out. I'm recording this Tuesday evening, so this pod probably won't come out till Wednesday morning after waivers, but all of the picks will be on there, but this is going to kind of go into more depth on why I chose those picks. It's also going to have some injury updates on this pod. But as usual, these are our top waiver wire additions owned in less than 60% of ESPN leagues. Typically, we select 2 or 3 at each position, and then maybe a few extra here and there. Just kind of depends on how deep the position is for the week. But also, we want to thank our sponsors, Big Reed BBQ, Automotive Detailing Solutions, This Little Piggy Barbecue Food Truck, and Mimi's Children's Boutique. Thank you guys for stepping up, supporting us. We really appreciate it. And y'all, please check these people out. If you're a fan of the pod, these people are fans of the pod and they support us, and we really appreciate that. Our title sponsor for the show is Mimi's Children's Boutique, located in Jonesboro. It fulfills all clothing needs for the little ones. Owners Melissa Johnson and Megan Rao offer children and baby boutique brand clothing and accessories, vinyl print t-shirts, and so much more. You can find them on Main Street in Jonesboro, open from 10 to 6 Tuesday through Friday and 10 to 2 on Saturday. All right, guys. Now, you all know everybody's having babies all the time, and every time you got a baby shower, you're always looking for something to go pick out. Guys, you know, hey, maybe you score some points with the wife and be like, hey, I'll go pick out something for that baby shower for you. Go on over to Mimi's Children's Boutique and go pick something out. They will be glad to help you. And you can also impress your wife by picking out something nice for her to take to the baby shower and take something off her plate. Thank you, Mimi's Children's Boutique. We appreciate y'all supporting the show. Rolling on in, of course, just kind of a preview of our upcoming pod. We've got our Start, Sit, Sleeper pod coming up and the graphic for later on this week. We're going to try to get that out Thursday. So obviously Thursday night players will not be on the Start, Sit, Sleeper pod, and we will not be choosing those players. Honestly, sit all players on Thursday night anyway, don't we? No, I'm just playing. But start your studs. As y'all know, y'all have heard me talk before, I'm not the biggest fan of starting players on Thursday night unless they are the studs. So just keep that in mind. There's several injuries that I'm about to talk about here in just a minute that are playing on Thursday night. So if any of these guys are on your team, just kind of be on the lookout as we get closer to that, because our pod won't come out till after Thursday. All right. So jumping right on in, the number one, like I just talked about, Thursday night player, Saquon Barkley went down with an ankle injury. Lord knows he's had a history of those before. He did not practice on Monday. Brian Daboll will not rule him out yet for Thursday. Originally, They thought he would be out multiple weeks. Dable said that he has already felt a lot better today. Since Sunday, I wouldn't get my hopes up if you had him, because they had him labeled week to week, and then he goes day to day. That's normally not a good sign for at least a Thursday night game, much less, Sunday night versus even a Thursday. So for this week, doesn't sound that great, but it does sound pretty promising for next week, because if they were expecting multiple weeks and then they go to day, there's probably a good chance he only misses this week, which probably is not a terrible thing anyway, considering he had a terrible matchup, even though it was at home against the 49ers on Thursday night, who have been great on defense this year. Them and Dallas are two matchups that you really want to avoid for certain positional players. But yep, keep an eye on Saquon's practice activity. Probably not going to play. Be ready to have a backup fired up. Matt Breida is his backup, but honestly, it's probably going to be a timeshare. The last time that Barkley missed, we all thought Breida was going to be the man, and then the third string guy ended up coming in and having a bigger role than Matt Breida. So there's no telling. Honestly, I'll just avoid that matchup in that backfield entirely because they're playing the 49ers. Rolling on, sad case here. Nick Chubb had really a devastating knee injury on Monday night. It says looks to be done, but he's done for the year. He's undergoing surgery already. And Coach Kevin Stefanski said it's the same knee that he had surgery on in 2015, which we knew that, we seen it. But Stefanski said that he's already going to undergo a season-ending knee surgery. So they didn't give any specifics on what all he tore or what all he did, but he will have surgery and he'll be done for the year. So we're going to talk about his replacement later on. Cooper Kupp was placed on the IR for week 1, expected back week 5. Sorry, Kupp owners. We talked about his replacement, Puka Nacua, who's not even he's not even on the waiver segment anymore because he's owned in like 80% of leagues, which he should be, because I'm pretty sure he's like wide receiver 10 now. So I hope you got him. I didn't get him in any leagues, unfortunately, but that's just how it goes. But keep rolling him. I did hear one of the beat writers say that Sean McVay does expect Cooper Kupp to return by week 5, like on week 5 when he's first eligible. So that's good news. Next, Amon-Ra St. Brown came out of the game Sunday with an ankle injury. Ended up returning later in the game. He came out early fourth quarter, came back and he got targeted one more time, didn't catch it. But the fact that he came back is good. There was no more updates as far as that goes this week. So keep an eye on his practice activity, but I expect him to be fine considering that he did come back in the game. Moving on to Austin Eckler, who eventually got ruled out for week 2, which is pretty crazy because supposedly he got hurt during the game in week 1 and continued to play through it, and then he got ruled out for week 2. Brandon Staley announced Monday that there's no timeline for his return, which kind of sounds scary, but it's kind of also misleading because that doesn't mean that he's not going to return anytime soon. It's just they don't know when he's going to return yet, so obviously there's no timeline if they don't know when he's going to return. So could be this weekend, could be next week, who knows. Keep an eye on his practice schedule just to see when he might return. But, I mean, really, there's no way to know. Originally, he was labeled week to week, but, I mean, who knows? I just keep an eye on it. I apologize. Keep an eye on his practice schedule to see what they plan on doing with him for the rest of the week. We'll try to update y'all on him on Thursday because we know he's such a big name. Going on in next, DK Metcalf ended up missing some time during the game on Sunday with a rib injury. Dr. Coach Pete Carroll said DK was just a little sore. So that means he could have like 8 broken ribs for all we know, because Dr. Coach Pete Carroll is probably the most optimistic injury-related coach there is in the league, which is crazy. But anyway, he came back in the game. He played 80% of the snaps after, like, total. He should be fine. He was not expected to practice today. So he's probably end up going to have a maintenance day just to kind of get healthy and kind of be shored up for this weekend. I expect him to be out there. Jalen Waddle got a concussion. It was put in the concussion protocol. And it's currently in the concussion protocol. There was no updates as far as that goes as of earlier today. So if we're going off last year's concussion protocol, which I don't think it's changed any, we'll see as this unfolds, because there really hasn't been that many players in concussion protocol yet. But normally it takes about a week. And if we remember last year, typically if you get concussion protocol, you're going to miss a week, and we will see how that plays out. Obviously, Jalen Waddle's been pretty good for Miami and pretty key. It'd be a big boost for Tyreek Hill if he did end up missing this week. But we'll keep an eye on that. We'll try to update y'all on him on Thursday as well. Unfortunately, Joe Burrow tweaked his calf injury during the game Sunday. Honestly, it might have been for the best, because let's be honest, for the last 2 weeks, he has not looked like the Joe Burrow we know. And I'm just wondering how much that has to do with the calf injury. The head coach said that he's currently being in the process of being evaluated for the severity. So we don't know anything. I'm sure we'll find out later on this week. But I would be surprised if they did not hold out their franchise poster boy player to let him heal up some, especially since he re-aggravated something that he had coming into the beginning of the season. So if you got Joe Burrow, you better be looking for a replacement, maybe one of these guys that I'll talk about here in a little bit. I apologize for all the sinus stuff, guys. I mowed today, and I should not have done that before the pod. I'm sorry. Anyway, moving on. Got Lamar Jackson with a hand injury. He's fine. He said he was fine afterward. He's listed as questionable, but he was interviewed after the game, said he was fine. His hand was good, but apparently he had a stinger late in the game. Told reporters he was fine afterward. Doesn't seem like a big deal, but if you do see a questionable tag, it's a hand injury, a stinger. He should be good to go. Travis Etienne, I really don't even know how this is a questionable designation, but it said he had cramps in the game this past weekend. Obviously, he's going to be hydrated and should be back and fine for this weekend, but he's listed as questionable for some reason for cramps, but he should be good to go. Brandon Ayuk, shoulder injury, was a non-participant in practice on Monday, which is kind of big because they're playing the Giants on Thursday night. So non-participant, which could mean they're just trying to let him rest and heal up before Thursday night, try not to rush him back because they play Thursday. We'll see. He did finish the game, which is promising on Sunday, but we'll just have to wait and watch. Just keep an eye on his practice schedule on Wednesday and see if he gets at least a limited practice in. And if he does, there's probably a good chance that he'll play. If he does not, I'm pretty sure we'll see more Deebo Samuel, who really balled out Sunday and looked like the Deebo Samuel of old that we were used to seeing. Next to be Christian Watson, was again ruled out on Sunday, even though he got a limited practice in on Friday before. He got ruled out Sunday. Hopefully he'll make a season debut sooner rather than later. I would think if he practiced limited on Friday, even though he got ruled out, there's a good chance he comes back this weekend. And if anybody's seen that offense, they could really use a dominant pass catcher. They've been spreading the ball around, but nobody's really taken over that role for that offense yet. Next will be David Montgomery. Went down fairly early I say fairly early, I think it was sometime in the third quarter in Sunday's game with a thigh injury. He was originally labeled week to week, but Dan Campbell said on Monday he's currently labeled as day to day. So we're about to find out if Dan Campbell is optimistic as Dr. Coach Pete Carroll, and then we'll have to start calling him Dr. Coach Dan Campbell, or if he's really telling the truth. But currently he said he's listed as day to day, which is a lot better news depending on his recovery. He should there's a chance he could be available, but I'd be watching his practice activity as we go throughout the week. Next would be Deontay Johnson with that hamstring injury he suffered in week 1. Eventually did get ruled out for week 2, which he was labeled week to week, but they took forever to rule him out. Finally ruled him out before week 2, and they placed him on the IR before Monday's game, which means he will miss at least the next 4 weeks. So if you got Deontay Johnson, I hope you got an IR spot. Slot him in there. If not, you got to have to wait 4 weeks before he's going to be activated at the minimum. Next will be Jamal Williams. Unfortunately, got a hamstring injury in, I believe it was around the second quarter of Monday night's game for the New Orleans Saints. Eventually was ruled out. I do not have an update at this time, as it was just yesterday that he was injured. But Tony Jones filled in admirably. So just keep an eye for updates later on this week for Jamal Williams. But they are really thin at running back in New Orleans. If they decide not to bring anybody in, Tony Jones will have a fairly heavy workload. But we'll talk more about him here in a little bit. And then last but not least, Anthony Richardson, in concussion protocol, got a concussion on Sunday. No new updates as far as that goes. Like we said with Jalen Waddle, probably going to be a week absence. If Gardner Minshew ends up starting, could be a possible streamer for you, as he does have some weapons there in Indianapolis, and also could be a benefit for Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce and the rookie wide receiver there in Indianapolis. That's pretty much going to wrap up our injury updates. And like I said, we're going to update you on some of those again on Thursday, as we'll have some more fresh updates as that goes. But we're going to go ahead and jump on into our waiver wire for this week. And we're going to go ahead and start with our quarterbacks first. And for our number 1 quarterback ad for this week, and honestly, I just still don't understand why he's not owned and started in more leagues, but that's going to be Jared Goff for Detroit. He's only owned in 51.8% of leagues. This week, he's playing Atlanta. And honestly, I mean, the guy's in a fairly high-powered offense and throws the ball anywhere around the mid to upper 30s. He's averaging 35 pass attempts a game right now, but he's sitting right around 300 yards a game. Had 3 touchdowns, 1 interception last week. Good enough for most standard scoring leads for 30.92 points. But I mean, he's averaging around a 70% completion rate so far, and he's QB9. And it just doesn't seem like he's going to slow down. Eventually, he's going to get Jameson Williams back. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be more involved in the pass game if David Montgomery's out, probably, and more involved in the game, period, which could bode well. But also, Sam Laporta seems to really be getting his foothold going. And Ahmad St. Brown's doing his thing. And then they've got another wide receiver stepping up in Josh Reynolds. So, I mean, it's looking really good for Jared Goff. QB9, I don't see any reason why he doesn't finish the season somewhere around there, honestly. So, I mean, if you're looking for somebody to replace Anthony Richardson with, or maybe somebody that's gotten off to a slow start this year, I really like Jared Goff. Number 2, Baker Mayfield. I know Clay's really going to like this. I am not a Baker fan by any means, but that does not mean he's not a productive fantasy player. And he has been a productive fantasy player so far this year. Only owned in 10.4% leagues, has weapons out the wazoo with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, who seems to be the Mike Evans of old. Like, I guess he's quarterback proof. I mean, that's all you can say, because whoever he has at quarterback, it seems like he produces. You'd think with as many, I think it's 9 or 10,000 yard seasons, we'd give him a little bit more credit. But either way, Baker Mayfield and him have a connection, and it's looking good. They also have Cade Otton at the tight end, Rashad White, and Sean Tucker in the backfield. I mean, and then Trey Palmer is the third wide receiver. This team's really got it going. If they can block for them, they are going to have many good offensive games. And honestly, probably the Saints' only competition in the NFC South. But this week, they're playing against Philadelphia. Now, in the past, that seems pretty scary, right? Well, apparently, and also Baker Mayfield and Tampa Bay have played against two of the worst defenses in the league so far, and he's QB 11. But now he gets a matchup against the 32nd ranked defense against quarterbacks. That's correct. The last ranked defense against quarterbacks so far this year. And that's primarily because Philadelphia's secondary is decimated. Like the last I'd heard, their third string cornerback was getting like carried off the field or something last week, and they were down to some guys that they elevated off the practice squad that they just started practicing. So their secondary's pretty banged up, and then now you're going to have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Trey Palmer going up against them, and all Baker Mayfield has to do is get them the ball. Sign me up. So I like Baker Mayfield a lot this week as a streamer, and honestly, might be somebody to watch going forward because he has a lot of fairly decent matchups playing Atlanta and Carolina in his division. So, yeah, sign me up for some Baker Mayfield if you need him. This could be the revitalization of his career that we thought was coming years ago when he was at the Browns. And maybe he's just now figuring out how to put it together. Who knows? But Baker Mayfield's my number 2. And number 3, another Clay pick that is seeming to work out, which I could not believe how many times this guy's been throwing the ball till I looked it up. But that's C.J. Stroud for Houston. And some of these guys are probably way more streaming options than they are long-term options, which at this point you should not be bailing on some of your stud quarterbacks. They're long-term options. But if you're not happy with their performance and you're looking to maybe just wait to see till they get it going, these are some options, especially for this week, that you might want to give a shot. Now, C.J. Stroud's only owned in 7.4% of leagues, but he's throwing the ball around 45 times a game. 45. That is a tremendous amount of volume, even for a rookie quarterback. And like we said, volume is king. If you're throwing the ball 45 times, it doesn't matter if you're only throwing it for 5 yards, but you're still going to have a fair amount of yardage and a decent chance for somebody to fall into the end zone. Not to mention, he's got some pretty decent pass-catching playmakers emerging in Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and Schultz. Dalton Schultz that we already know. So he could be a really sneaky quarterback streamer, if not more than that. He doesn't run the ball a lot, which is not like these other rookies. But he doesn't run the ball a ton. But this week they're playing Jacksonville, who has an okay defense, and you're going to hear me talk a little bit about them later on. But so far against quarterbacks, Jacksonville's ranked 26th, which is pretty good for C.J. Stroud coming off a pretty good game against the Colts. So I like him a lot. Like just for instance, last week he was 30 for 47, which is 63.8%, 384 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did have a fumble, which took his points down a little bit, but he also had to carry the ball for 3 times with only 1 yard, but he's been carrying the ball around 3 or 4 times every game this year. So they played Jacksonville this week. Then they got Pittsburgh. Probably wouldn't play him against Pittsburgh, but then they got Atlanta. So I like C.J. Stroud a lot this week. Could be somebody to stream. And then just a little nugget, a little extra person that I do like a lot this week. It might be kind of rough for him, but that is quarterback Sam Howell, who's QB 10 on the year, okay? Last week at Denver, 27 for 39, 69% completion rate percentage, 299 yards and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and then 2 carries for 13 yards. So he's playing Buffalo, but then he plays at Philadelphia, who we just talked about being a pretty vulnerable to quarterback passers. So could be somebody to keep an eye on. And then after Philadelphia, then you got Chicago. So we're starting to get week 5 is bye week time, and Sam Howell might be somebody you want to keep in mind if your quarterback's on bye in week 5. So because he's playing again at home against Chicago. And that's going to pretty much wrap up my waiver wire quarterbacks for this week. I still like Derek Carr, but until that's somebody that I talked about last week who didn't pan out this week. But if you watched any of the game, their offensive line has been playing atrociously. I mean, I'm pretty sure Derek Carr got hit as many times as their running back, probably, which is sad to say. But their left tackle, Trevor Penning, God bless him, he's doing his best, but he is getting beat a lot on pass blocking protection. And he's looking pretty good in run blocking, which bodes well for their run game, but pass blocking, not so much. So keep an eye on Derek Carr. If they can shore that up, I think he's going to be a lot more successful. But as of right now, I don't think you can start Derek Carr unless it's a really, really good matchup on paper. And that's going to pretty much round out our quarterbacks, though. I just want to throw those last two guys in there. And then we're going to jump right on into our running backs. And number one on the list is got to be Jerome Ford. He's going to be starting this week for Nick Chubb, who looked pretty darn good in his stead when Nick Chubb went down fairly early in that game Monday night. And Jerome Ford is going to be starting for him. And honestly, I think he could be very serviceable. The only thing is if they end up signing somebody like Kareem Hunt, who I'm going to talk about here in a minute. But Jerome Ford came in, ended up with 16 carries, 106 yards, 3 catches for 25 yards and touchdown. So had a really, really good week in week one against a Pittsburgh defense that's really good. But this week, they're going to be playing against a Tennessee run defense that is really, really good as well. So it's a tough matchup, but Jerome Ford could be the guy this week, or at least until they sign somebody else. But head coach Stefanski came out and acknowledged that Jerome Ford will be the featured back, but they will be looking to add depth in the backfield and could end up adding someone that could end up taking away snaps, who I'm going to talk about here in a little bit. But that's the number one ad right now, because if they don't add anybody and Jerome Ford is the man, I mean, we're talking about a high-end RB2. Because he's going to be in a bell cow role. He catches the ball well. He runs the ball pretty well. They got an awesome offensive line. And honestly, Deshaun Watson is not looking as great, so they're leaning more on that run game than they probably thought they were going to have to. So that's Jerome Ford at number one. Number two is going to be Zach Moss, owned in 32.3% of leagues. We found out last week he was going to be starting for them. And, we figured they might ease him back in, Nope. He was the featured back in Indianapolis for sure, as he played 98% of the plays on offense and put up 20.7 points against Houston. So 98%, I think it's undoubtedly pretty well known that he is the RB1 there in Indianapolis. And I guess they're deciding to ride it out with him. And he's got a tough matchup this week against Baltimore. But like we always say, volume is king. Whether it's Gardner Minshew or Anthony Richardson, it's going to be all Moss in the backfield. I like his chance to catch more passes this week if Minshew starts. But either way, he's been really efficient and looked really good so far in Indianapolis. So Zach Moss at number two. Number three, I'm going back to the well, and that's Kenneth Gainwell and for Philadelphia. Now, the only thing, he was on here last week. He ended up getting ruled out. That's my fault, guys. And unfortunately, he got ruled out, but that does not mean when he comes back, that does not mean that he's not going to be the guy. He's only owned in 21.5% leagues, and this week he's playing at home against Minnesota, and we all know that defense is pretty terrible. So I would be keeping an eye on Kenneth Gainwell. Swift had a huge week, like 26 carries last week, and did well with them, but you can't tell me they're going to give him 26 carries every week. I'd be willing to bet we go back to a timeshare when Kenneth Gainwell comes. Kenneth Gainwell comes back. When he was there, he was in on 60% of the plays before and very efficient, very effective. because they have such a good offensive line and such a good offense with Jalen Hurts. I expect it to go back to some kind of a 60-40 timeshare with Swift. To me, that seems very beneficial, and that would keep Kenneth Gainwell in the flex low-end RB2 conversation easily. And then that's my number 3 guy. Number 4 is going to be Kareem Hunt. Thank you, Clay, because I was mowing later this evening and I had not heard that Kareem Hunt has scheduled a visit to go see the Cleveland Browns. Now, that does not mean he's going to sign, but I mean, honestly, let's think about it, guys. He spent 4 years there. He knows the offensive system with Kevin Stefanski. He knows the players already, so he's got chemistry there. The only thing is, he knows they need him just as much as he needs them. So I'm not 100% sure how that's going to play out as far as money, because is he going to ask for more than they're going to be willing to put down? I don't know. But right now, currently, he's only owned in like 5% of the leagues. But he would not be a terrible speculative ad just in case they end up signing Kareem Hunt, because if they do, he is going to get volume, and it will not be the whole Jerome Ford show like we're expecting right now. And we all know he's a good pass catcher. He can run well in between the tackles, and it could be a 50-50 split between him and Ford, which would really ruin the backfield. But he could end up taking over as well, and then Ford could go back to that third down role like he had whenever Chubb was the man. So Kareem Hunt could be somebody to be interested in there because they could sign him as a free agent. Number 5, I'm going to have Tony Jones Jr. This is pretty much a streaming option for 1 week because I think it's a good chance with that hamstring injury Williams ends up missing. If he does come back and play, he's probably going to be super limited. But, I mean, right now, Tony Jones is de facto number 1 in a pretty decent running New Orleans offense as of last week. And this week they're going to be playing at Green Bay. And honestly, it's just a volume play. Tony Jones is going to get all the goal line work. He had 2 rushing touchdowns last week because they got in the red zone, and they just ran the ball because they couldn't block anybody for Derek Carr long enough to pass it. So they just ran the ball. And Green Bay, who struggled a fair amount against the run in the first couple of weeks, which is shocking because we all thought Green Bay's defense was going to be some studs. And they've been struggling more than we thought, but they've been winning games. Anyway, like I said, it's going to be a 1-week play. Kamara comes back week 4. He's going to be the man when he comes in. But if you need a guy, if one of your guys got injured or is hurt, and you just need somebody to bridge that gap, say you got Kamara and you had Chubb and you just need that 1-week play, Tony Jones Jr. could be that guy for you playing at Green Bay this week. And then last but not least, this is kind of number 6, but what it is, these are just some stashes, okay? I'm not going to talk a lot about them, but there are some guys that are in some situations that can be really beneficial for you in the future. And number 1 on that list is going to be Roschon Johnson, playing way more efficiently than Khalil Herbert. Khalil Herbert has not messed up or done anything bad, and Chicago's offense has looked as terrible as we thought as they did last year. But Roschon Johnson just looks better. He makes his team better. And what if Chicago's like, you know what? We're going to trade Herbert for some more draft picks, and we're going to let Roschon take over because we just got to change it up. And there's a fairly decent running back market starting to open up out there right now. And somebody as young as Khalil Herbert is going to fetch a better trade value than not. So if they do trade him, Roschon Johnson will be the man. Catches the ball very well, something that Herbert does not catch the ball as well out of the backfield, and seems to have a good rapport with Justin Fields. So I like Roschon Johnson to be stashed. Jaylen Warren, which is high in stash, but he's only owned in about 40% of leagues, but was a real spark for a struggling Pittsburgh offense Monday night. And he just looked way better when he touched the ball compared to Najee Harris, who they almost touched the ball equally, honestly. I think Najee had 6 carries, and I think Jalen had 4. I really don't know what this Pittsburgh offense is doing, honestly, but I think Jaylen Warren is going to be the guy eventually, and Pittsburgh could be one of those people that trade Najee. I mean, he just does not look good at all. And I really think this goes all the way back to when he had that Liz Frank injury, and he just has not bounced back ever since. So I think it's only a matter of time. Jalen Warren for Pittsburgh. And then last but certainly not least, somebody that's been flying way under the radar as far as running back handcuffs and stashes, who's starting to carve out a decent little role in the offense, and that's Tajay Spears for Tennessee. I've seen a couple of his highlight plays. Man, you want to talk about somebody that's just electric with the ball. His running efficiency is scary good, like as good as Derrick Henry's good. And he's starting to carve out that role, like I was just saying. And he's really good at catching the ball. So I think they're going to start working him in a little bit more, spelling Derrick Henry. I don't think they're going to take a lot of carries away from Henry by any means. But Tajay Spears could get 5-6 carries a game with 3 or 4 targets a game. And if you're in a deeper league, that's a flex play, at least for a team that runs the ball and throws the ball as much as Tennessee does. I mean, runs the ball as much as Tennessee does. And if he can get 3 or 4 targets, as fast, electric as he is, I mean, all it takes is one big play, and that's a good flex play right there. And then let's not even talk about if Henry were to go down. I mean, you're talking about Tajay Spears as a high-end RB2 with the way he's looked and the volume that he would inherit. So Tajay Spears is another one I like to stash. And that's going to round out our running backs, and we're going to roll right on into our wide receivers. And number 1 on the list is Puka Nakua's teammate, Tutu Atwell for the Rams. Honestly, I thought real hard about putting him on this column last week, but I had Puka on there last week. And I didn't know if I want to put 2 Rams on there, but apparently I should have, and Tutu has proven me wrong. But he's only owned in 31.7% of leagues. This week he's going to be playing at Cincinnati, and I'm climbing aboard the Tutu train. That's right. Tutu. All right, yeah, that's right. Enough of that. I know everybody's probably laughing at that one. But anyway, Tutu Atwell, man, he did it 2 weeks in a row, and now seems to be very embracing that wide receiver 2 role for the Los Angeles Rams. And Matthew Stafford is having a blast throwing to these young guys. I mean, he is a solid flex option right now in shallow leagues. This week he had 9 targets, eight targets last week, and this week 7 catches for 77 yards and 1 run. Last week he had a touchdown. They're getting him the ball, and they're going to him plenty. And with his explosiveness, I mean, we're looking at a solid wide receiver 3 or flex play right now. And that's Tutu Atwell for the Los Angeles Rams. Moving on, my second wide receiver that I really like, somebody that I liked earlier on, and I talked a little bit about, and he kind of underwhelmed in game 1, but that's going to be Adam Thielen, because he really bounced back in game 2 against New Orleans. And he's owned in about 52% of leagues, but he looks like the clear wide receiver 1 in Carolina. This week he's getting a lot better matchup than New Orleans, as he's going to be at Seattle. Last week against New Orleans, which is a very stout secondary right now, he had 9 targets, 7 catches for 54 yards and touchdown. Honestly, we heard about him being the wide receiver 1 all through training camp. I thought he was the wide receiver 1 coming in, even though a lot of people thought DJ Chark was. And Young seems to be getting a real have a fair amount of chemistry with him and throwing the ball and going to him a fair amount. And Thielen just seems to be the main one he's looking for when he does throw the ball. He doesn't throw the ball a lot, but when he does, he's looking for Thielen. And Seattle is the 29th ranked defense against wide receivers, which could be very, very beneficial for Adam Thielen. So I like Adam Thielen a lot, especially this week, but possibly season long, as him and Bryce Young develop more chemistry. And then last but certainly not least, somebody I have talked about before earlier on and has finally seemed to come to fruition, and that's old Tank Dell. Monster Tank Dell, and all 5'10" of him, 180 pounds. But the dude is lightning in a bottle. He plays for Houston. He's owned in 3.9% leagues. And this week he is going, this week he's going against Jacksonville at Jacksonville, which honestly is not the worst matchup. But like I said, he's lightning in a bottle. this week, you've seen the rapport with him and Stroud come out. 10 targets, 7 catches, 72 yards, and a touchdown. And if he gets 10, even if he gets 7 or 8 targets a game, with the athleticism and explosiveness that he gets that opportunity. He can be a high end flex play at worst. He's the number 2 option so far on that team after Nico Collins right now. And you could argue maybe Dalton Schultz was that number 2 option, but he didn't go to Dalton Schultz 10 times. He went to Tank Dell 10 times. And he went to Nico Collins 11 times. So to me, Tank Dell's going to be that number 2 option. John Mechie came back. I mean, you can say what you want, but Tank Dell was making plays all off season. I mean, all in preseason. He was making plays in camp. And now he's making plays in the regular season. I think he's the real deal. And I think he's somebody that you could probably sneakily get and play on some good matchup weeks, especially when they're going to have to throw the ball a lot. And like we said earlier, whenever we're talking about C.J. Stroud, throwing the ball 45 times a game, I think it's a better chance than not that he throws it 10 times to Tank Dell. So I like Tank Dell a lot. He's going to round out my wide receivers. There's some other guys that I like, but they're, Kendrick Bourne, I still like him. He still had 9 targets. He only caught, I think it was 4 of them this week, but I still like Kendrick Bourne a lot because Mac Jones is going to him a fair amount, and I still like Rashid Shaheed. It's just the only thing about Rashid Shaheed is Derek Carr can't stay upright long enough to pass the ball to him, honestly. Every time he gets time, he can throw the ball deep to him or Olave, but he's just not getting the kind of time that he needs, and they're not throwing the ball enough because he can't get that time. So that's why those 2 guys aren't on here, but I do like both of them still a fair amount. But now we're going to roll on into my tight end that I got, and number 1 still Zach Ertz. And I'm going to tell you right now, he's going to be number 1 on this list until he's over 60%. Because he's owned in 47.2% of leagues. This week he's got a little bit tougher matchup against Dallas, but it's more of the same. He was targeted 8 times, 6 catches, 56 yards. Not a great offense, but someone has to catch the ball. He's got a tough matchup, but they're only 15th. They're only 15th against tight ends so far this season, and honestly, I mean, you could do a lot worse than Zach Ertz, somebody that's done it for a long time in this league. And currently, the tight end 7 in fantasy football right now. And like I said, targeted a ton. 10 targets week 1, 8 targets week 2, 6 catches in both. Went for 56 yards, and that's probably going to be close to his average every week. Is going to be 6 for 56. And if you get 11 points out of your tight end every week, I think you'd be ecstatic. Next is going to be Hunter Henry, who could arguably be first. The only reason he's not first is because Zach Ertz seems to be getting more volume. Probably not as good of an offense, but Zach Ertz is getting more targets and more volume, so more opportunity. So that's why I like him. And not to mention, I do feel like Zach Ertz is probably on a team that's going to throw the ball or be behind in negative game scripts more than New England will, even though New England's been throwing the ball a lot so far. But Hunter Henry, he's only owned in 34.4% of leagues. This week they're going up against the Jets, which is not the best matchup. But he had another excellent week. 7 targets, 6 catches, 52 yards, and a touchdown. That's good enough to make him the number 2 tight end in fantasy through 2 weeks. That's correct, the number 2. TJ Hawkinson is the number 1. And that's only because Travis Kelce missed week 1. But honestly, Kelce didn't have a great week 2, which he's probably still trying to come back from that knee injury. But still, Hunter Henry, the number 2 tight end through 2 weeks. He's got a couple tough defenses coming up in the Jets and Dallas. But if they're going to be trailing and they're going to be throwing, and both of those teams have fairly good secondaries. So what's that going to do? That's going to force him to look at his tight end more. So if anything, this could be beneficial for Hunter Henry, even though it's some tough matchups. But him and Mac Jones seem to have this real sweet chemistry going on right now. Not to mention, Hunter Henry has a really high tight end pedigree coming out of college. He was supposed to be something special in for the Chargers and supposed to be take over for them eventually. And then they ended up letting him go as he didn't pan out. And maybe he's just kind of breaking out a little late, being a late bloomer. But I like Hunter Henry a lot. And then last but certainly not least, guy that I talked about before, and I'll be ashamed to say that I did drop on one of my fantasy teams and picked up Hayden Hurst, but I do plan on picking him back up, and that's Sam Laporta. I mean, I was really worried about them using him to block more like they were TJ Hawkinson way back when Hawkinson was there. But honestly, I think they've just realized how pure and athletic of a pass catcher he is. Far more than TJ Hawkinson, which is saying something. And he's only owned in 49.5% of leagues, but this week he gets to play against Atlanta. And I mean, he's living up to the hype. He's had 6 targets this week, 5 catches for 63 yards. He's currently the tight end 4 so far through 2 weeks. And he's starting to seem kind of like a safety valve for Jared Goff. This offense seems to be picking up right where it left off from last year. And honestly, in this offense, if you can sign me up for the super athletic pass catching tight end that they have, do it. And that's Sam Laporta. He's really looking like the number 2 option on offense right now, behind Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's either him or Gibbs, and Gibbs' usage has not been a tremendous amount. Now, we might see that go up with David Montgomery's injury, but still, Sam Laporta is looking really good. If he's floating around out there, I'd pick him up because there could be a chance that he could be one of these superstar tight ends that we're talking about at the end of the year. And then I could throw a couple more guys out there at y'all. Obviously, some of the ones that I really like are Jake Ferguson for Dallas, who caught a touchdown pass this past week. And then Hayden Hurst is another one that I really like. He is, I believe, owned in not that many. 1 second, I'll tell you. Yeah, only owned in like 21% leagues. Another one that is kind of flying under the radar right now is Gerald Everett. There's a lot of pass catchers there, but he's had a fair amount of usage, honestly. I mean, he's had some big plays. Last week he was only 3 for 47 with 3 targets, but somebody to keep a lookout for just in case. But also another guy that seems to be kind of a safety valve for his quarterbacks, Tyler Conklin for Zach Wilson, 5 for 50 last week. So might be another guy to be on the lookout for. And then also, if you got Taysom Hill out there, with them being thin at running back, don't be surprised if he gets a lot of run. He had 9 carries for 75 yards last week. And he's a tight end playing running back. And he's only owned in 6.9% of leagues. So if he's floating around out there, go check out and see if Taysom Hill's out there, because there's a good chance he could be getting some more carries this week with them being light at running back. And that's going to pretty much wrap up my tight end segment. We're going to roll right on into our streaming defenses. And I'll be honest, defensive streamers this week are tough. I really had to search hard for these two. One I really like, and then the other one I don't really like. But if you're in a bind, I think it's somebody that could have a good week. And number one that I really like is Jacksonville against Houston. Currently, Jacksonville's number 6 defense fantasy-wise. And they're playing at home against a rookie QB that just held against a rookie QB. And Jacksonville just held Kansas City 17 points while their defense put up 9 points against Kansas City. And we all know what they can do. And Travis Kelce was back. So they didn't win the game, but they held Kansas City 17 points. If they didn't win that game, then that's on their offense. And what do we think they can do to a rookie quarterback and an inexperienced offense like Houston? I think there's a good chance they can cause some chaos and get some turnovers. So sign me up for Jacksonville at home against Houston this week. And that's pretty much the best streaming option you got. There's some other really good options, but none that are owned in less than 60% of leagues. And then last but certainly not least, the New England Patriots against the Jets. I mean, Zach Wilson's a turnover machine. 3 interceptions last week. They're playing at New York, which is good for the Jets, but still the Pats travel fairly well, especially up there Their defense just come off a pretty tough game against Miami, but they held Miami to 24 points. And with the way Miami's been scoring the ball and playing, I'd almost consider that a win for their defense. And I think there's a good chance they get to Zach Wilson, and there's another good chance that he turns the ball over at least 2 interceptions this week and takes a couple sacks. So I like the Patriots defense against the New York Jets also. So, and that's pretty much going to wrap up our streaming defenses. And then I'll throw a couple kickers out there that are owned in a few leagues that have been doing pretty well. One is Brett Maher for the Rams. He's playing at Cincinnati, so you have to watch the weather, but he's getting a fair amount of opportunity. Nick Folk, again, 10 points this week. He's playing at Cleveland. You got to watch the weather, but the man's got an iron leg. He hasn't missed an extra point in forever in 3 days. Had 2 field goals this past week. Another one to watch out, Eddie Pinheiro. Playing at Seattle, not the best weather typically, but he did hit 2 50-yarders this past week for in the dome, at home against New Orleans, hit 2 50-yarders. So that bodes pretty well for having a big leg like that. And then let's see, another big one that is seeming to get real popular is the rookie for San Francisco, Jake Moody, the number 1 quarterback in fantasy right now. Hit a 50-yarder this past week. That's what I was kind of waiting on with him, to be honest. I want to see how he does in those long-distance kicks. But hit a 50-yarder, back-to-back 14-point weeks, and he's only owned in 34% of leagues. This week, like we talked about before, he's going to be at home playing against the Giants. So somebody to keep a lookout for, but the number 1 current kicker in fantasy and only owned in 34% of leagues. So those are a couple guys to keep a lookout for as far as your kickers go. And that's pretty much going to round out our waiver wire segment for week 3. And we really appreciate everybody listening. Thank you so much. Please like, subscribe, download, give us your feedback on your podcast application. We want to hear what you want to hear more of or what you don't want to hear more of. Just please let us know. But thank you for everybody listening. Please check out our sponsors, and y'all keep chasing that trophy.
This ain't how it's supposed to be. It should be just you and me.